Hello, lovelies. Let's have a little chat today about something I see quite often. Too often, you might say. Particularly amongst new writers, games masters, indie game designers, computer game creators, and even amongst a lot of the veterans who've got a few grey hairs in their beards and more dice than sense. And that is this kind of fear of using archetypes and tropes, cliches, you might say, less generously. There is this weird fear of them, that sneaking suspicion that if you lean on anything even slightly too familiar, anything that's ever been done before, then you have somehow failed. That you're being lazy in some way, that you're not original enough. And that's a shame. There is this whole culture, particularly online, that treats any recognizable trope or archetype like it's somehow radioactive. Like the moment you include a dark lord or a chosen one or a sassy rogue with a mysterious past, that the cliche police are going to kick in your door, revoke your nerd license and ship you off to El Salvador. But here's the thing. Tropes aren't bad. Archetypes aren't bad. They're tools. They are a form of narrative shorthand. They're familiar shapes that we recognize instinctively, which means that they are powerful as hell. They really cut to the quick. They get to the point. They skip to the chase. The reason we keep coming back to these archetypes, to the orphan hero, the reluctant mentor, the trickster, the obstinate bureaucrat, is because they work. They resonate. They strike a chord in our collective unconscious, to use Jung's language. They're primal. They're stories that we've been telling since we were drawing on cave walls in our own shit and whispering around fires. They're archetypes that, with slightly different spins or slightly different meanings, seem to be all but universal to the human animal. They're things that we learn simultaneously as we learn and gain our capacity to use and comprehend language, whether it be spoken or written, when we play pretend as kids. So let's take Star Wars as an example, and I do mean the original trilogy, not anything else, at least not to start with. The original trilogy had heart. It was basically what you get if you load Kurosawa and Flash Gordon into a particle accelerator and smash them together, then add a dash of World War II dogfighting footage, and a John Williams score that would make even Darth Vader weep a cybernetic tear or two. These films are the semiotic lingua franca of a certain age bracket in our culture. Arguably, Harry Potter performs the same role for slightly younger people, and then, I don't know, Minecraft, Fortnite, God help us. Lucas understood the mythic structure, or at least he cribbed notes out of Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces and reskinned it with robots and laser swords. But he was telling a mythic story that leant upon archetypes. Not just the archetypes of the characters themselves, but in the film as a whole, its plot, its beat, its story points. Obi-Wan is the wise mentor. Vader is a shadow version of the self, the embodiment of everything the hero could become if he strays too far from the path. Leia is the noble feminine, the seeming maiden turning out to be the warrior mother to our little family of misfits. Han is the wisecracking rogue. Yoda is the strange mythical guru. The structure isn't just familiar, it's archetypal. It's mythic. It's the same linguistic and semiotic operating system that Anansi stories, Norse folklore, or the Greek myths all operate on. And that is why it works and why it has had such legs that even Disney can't quite completely ruin it yet. It's comforting, it's intuitive, it makes sense, even to people who've never read Campbell or have no idea about what Star Wars is or means. Even if you have no grounding in Jung and have never cracked open a copy of Beowulf, you can understand what's going on. Now compare that to the sequel trilogy and its whiplash between the various entries. You can feel them first trying to meet expectations through simple repetition, then to try and subvert them, and then to abruptly correct course. It is the subvert expectations part in the second film that made that term, subvert expectations, into a sarcastic one in all the online discourse, something to be avoided. They were trying to do the unexpected and the surprising and the edgy, and sometimes that works. Sometimes when you subvert expectations, it is an incredibly powerful story tool. You lead people down the garden path and you hit them with a twist. But Star Wars was always an exercise in modern myth making, and that was never going to be the place to do your subverted expectations. The power of Star Wars has always been in meeting those expectations and rhyming, as Lucas says, but with the mythology that we all learn by osmosis through our culture. When you subvert those expectations, you lose something important. You break the shape of the story, you lose the emotional rhythm, the familiarity, the resonance. You can no longer piggyback on all the weight of that historical, mythological work that's already been done for you. You sabotage the catharsis. Rey isn't a classic archetype, she is more of a puzzle box, and the solution is shit. And she's arguably a Mary Sue, an overpowered kind of self-insert for the Kathleen Kennedy crowd. Kylo Ren is a tantrum in a mask, not an echo of Darth Vader's shadow self. The myth-making is gone, replaced by Twitter debates and production committee compromises and agendas over story. So what does all of this have to do with tabletop RPGs? Well, why are fantasy RPGs still stuck in that kind of Tolkien-esque mould? Why are we still mostly doing dwarves and elves and dragons and goblins and fireballs the same as we were 50 years ago? Is it laziness? Maybe a bit, but more than that, I think it's accessibility. Everyone knows what an elf is. Or anyone who's interested in role-playing knows what an elf is. Everyone knows what a dwarf is, what magic is, what a dragon represents. It's a big part of D&D's secret sauce, I think, apart from being first on the scene. You can jump into a game with zero prior reading and you can still get it enough to play. That shared cultural lexicon makes play easier, smoother, faster, and it makes it a lot easier to onboard players quickly and easily into the game, because everyone has a kind of a handle on what fantasy is, because it's quite a tight genre, all things considered. Archetypes in RPGs do a lot of the heavy lifting of characterization early on when your character is new, or whenever you run into a villain or a stock NPC. The noble paladin, the snarky rogue, the grizzled veteran, the horny bard who wants to shag everything, the wizard with too many secrets, not enough friends. These aren't boring necessarily, they're not staid, they're not cliches exactly. What they are is effective myth-making. You can start from there and then you can add little twists or evolve and deepen them over time. But if you start with complete novelty, whether it's an archetype or the game world itself, then you inevitably end up spending more time explaining and making exposition about the state of the world than you do actually playing in it, which is often the best way to learn these things, piecemeal, as you play. And people aren't necessarily going to retain everything that you tell them, unless they get super into the lore. Jung's archetypes are especially useful to look at here. You've got the hero, the mentor, the trickster, for example, amongst innumerable others. These show up everywhere because they reflect parts of ourselves. The trickster challenges order, rebels, and embodies cleverness. The hero can be an idealized self. The mentor can be who you would like to become, or someone you respect in your life. These are deep psychological truths, or so Jung would have it, that surface again and again in our stories because they mirror who we are. They resonate with something within us. Campbell takes it a step further. The hero's journey, the call to adventure, the refusal of the call, the crossing of the threshold, the trials, the abyss, the transformation, the return, all of that jazz. It's not a rule book for stories, though many people treat it as one. It describes a pattern, a rhythm, the beat of a story that feels like it matters. Personally, I don't care too much for Campbell. You can read my comments elsewhere on this channel. But so many people use Campbell as a basis for either their crafting of myths and stories or their understanding of myths and stories that it's at least worth understanding Campbell's work in order to understand them. I think it has holes in it, but who am I? Some nerd in a wizard hat on a YouTube channel. Modern culture has its own newer archetypes, of course. We can add or take away archetypes, or they can shift meaning over time. The fat, lovable comedy dad who doesn't have a clue and gets into weird scrapes but somehow manages to hold it all together, still manages to bag a hot wife somehow. The final girl in horror, the innocent who survives the slaughter often by finding her own inner violence and ability to get free through that. The manic pixie dream girl who is a transformative influence on everyone else around her, inspiring and liberating them, but never really getting free herself of whatever it is that is torturing her. The tortured anti-hero looking for peace and meaning in life. Even pornography, even something as base and degenerate as pornography, has its sexy librarians and secretaries, its MILFs, its naughty schoolgirls, its vigorously oversexed handymen, you know? E-girls is a new archetype that we can all relate to, I think. But these are just modern masks for older roles, really. And they still do the job. They still signal something. And in pornography, certainly, there's that shorthand that gets you right into the action. And you know what you like, and it gives you a way to find it. Archetypes can even show up in real life. Some women in modern times, especially older women, have been consciously embracing the crone archetype from the whole triple goddess maiden mother crone thing. And there's power in that, in permission to age with dignity, to become the witch in the woods, the healer at the edge of the village in the hut, the matriarch who knows too much and gives no fucks and controls everything around her. That is a powerful thing, and a powerful archetype if you can embody it. You see other archetypes in more overt feminism, the liberated woman, the career woman, the girl boss, and these become aspirational, mythic in their own way. They shape expectations and roles and cultural conversations. But men in the modern context, the pickings tend to get a bit thinner in more recent years. Historically, sure, I think men are spoilt for choice when it comes to archetypes. And self-help gurus seem to do okay for themselves by exploiting men's lingering desire to be the badass or the player or the provider or protector. And we've got a lot of very ugly archetypes floating around as well, though, now. Schrodinger's rapist, the violent offender, the incel, the deadbeat dad, the roadman, the man baby, all of these things. These are mostly negative cautionary figures, but they have their own power in inspiring panic, and meaning that men with issues looking for more positive archetypes can rarely find them. These are warnings rather than aspirations, and there's precious little of the aspirational left. And when there is what you could arguably say is a positive male archetype, it's often a parody, and it's often even worse than the negative ones. The Ubermensch Alpha, the Giga Chad, the Sigma male lone wolf, all of that self-help bollocks. There are more wholesome or balanced male archetypes, though. They just don't get as much airtime, and maybe that's something we need to bring into stories, modernise some of the older archetypes. Mirroring the triple goddess, you could look to a triple god: the stag, the father, and the sage. The stag, a symbol of youthful masculinity, vigour, and competition. The father, the protector, provider, the moral centre, a fine, upstanding gentleman. The sage, the elder, the wise one, the eccentric, who teaches and guides and knows all kinds of cool stuff. And these map fairly well to Maiden Mother Crone, though they get less cultural emphasis, being a relative neologism coming from neo-paganism. But that brings me to personal experience, I guess. There's something liberating about embracing and embodying these archetypes consciously, what Grant Morrison and Chaos Magicians call fiction suits. You take on a fictional persona and you live it in order to live out something, which is like embracing an archetype. There's a point in life where, rather than fighting the aging process, you lean into it. And that's where I increasingly find myself, though infirmity lay me waste and ill health curse my every waking moment. I am become the sage, beard whitening and less kempt, dressing more for comfort than speed. These days, it must be said, wandering the village, dressed in a kilt, hobbling along on a skull cane, and embracing my place as the village eccentric that people whisper about behind their hands. People either accept the unedited you, or they don't. And increasingly, as you get older, caring about what other people think seems increasingly like too much effort. Rather, the persona that you project becomes a filter for the people who are cool and who could actually matter to you. You stop feeling the need to explain yourself or curry favour, and that is a kind of power. So archetypes have power in storytelling. They have power as myths. They seem to have psychological and sociological power, and they have individual power when you embody them or take them on or turn them into a fiction suit that you can wear. So there's a lot of good stuff to be said about archetypes. It's not all bad, it's not all cliche. They are the bones of good storytelling. They're a shortcut, a cheat code to how we can understand each other and convey meaning. They're a symbolic language within a language. They're how we tell tales that matter to us and to other people. And I think we forget that at our peril. Ryan Johnson. So use them, twist them, play with them, bonk them, but don't throw them away. Without them, you're just shouting meaningless stuff into the void, and you have a lot of work to do to make the meaningless into meaningful, especially if you don't tap into the invisible structures that are already there. Sang.
The whole Rose is a dying of the consumption. Rose's house, the finest and only cat house in the town of Jezebel, is up for grabs. It's every girl for herself, and only one can earn the deed to the house, and Rose's stash of gold all to herself. A rootin', tootin', moochin' adversarial story game for 2+ players. No GM, pack of cards needed, poker chips or beads needed, and you can get it at post-mart.com, lulu.com, or drive-through RPG.
Murder me and fuck my skull. Put my body in a vat of acid. Put my brain into a jar.